And so within a month or so, the pandemic hit and we were kind of sitting at home. And I realized that I could do more from the continent than I can do from living here in New York City. So on a whim, I mean, after a couple of months of thought, but not you can't really fully prepare yourself for a move like that, I decided to move to Ghana. So in November of 2020, I packed up all my stuff, put it in the storage, and jumped on a flight and moved. All right, all right, all right. Welcome to Pan-African Perspectives. Are we live? Are we live? Can you guys hear me? Let me know if you can hear me. If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up and let me know where you're watching from. It looks like some people said they can hear me. So let me get into my intro and then we'll get into it. So today we're going to be talking about my story. I recently was interviewed and it was an interesting one. It's really more about my professional career and why I moved to Ghana, what Authentic African is all about. There's a lot of people who ask me what we're doing, why we're doing it, all of that kind of stuff. I figured the best way to share it is through communications that I've had with other people who've asked me my story. So I'm going to bring that to you. But those of you who are new and who are not aware of who I am and what this is all about, let me give you guys a little bit of a background. So Pan-African Perspectives is where we dive into the real life experiences of visiting Africa, moving to the continent of Africa, and investing in African ventures, and also possibly buying land, all with the ultimate goal of advancing Africa and restoring it to its rightful place on the world stage. My mission and our mission is to support an independent Africa and empower African people on the continent or in the diaspora. So whether you're currently living in Africa, you recently migrated, you're foundational Black American, this live stream is for you. So I'm Joe Hatagua, your host and the founder of Authentic African. So each week I'll share my experiences living, traveling, and investing in Africa. And from time to time, I'll also be interviewing or will be interviewed by people who want to or are living on the continent. So we got Kwame here from ATL. Shout out to Kwame. We got Belinda from Los Angeles. Tim is watching from Jonesboro, Georgia. We got Detroit to Africa saying good afternoon. Shout out to Detroit to Africa. Who else do we got? Wow, we got Ian from Zurich, Switzerland. All right. We got a couple people just saying they can hear me. Good. You guys can hear me on Instagram. You guys can hear me on YouTube. You can hear me on Facebook. And then also, let's see if we can get some people on. Oh, that's not going to work because I'm going to be sharing my screen. All right, cool. So we're going to get into it now. So what am I going to talk about today? For those of you who are just joining and are wondering what we're going to be reviewing, when I said I'm telling the truth, it's going to be about telling my story, right? What it is that led me to move to Ghana, my career experiences, dealing with the financial crisis and losing my job during that time frame, and just kind of talking through what all of it, like everything that led up to where we are today, right? Who made me who I am today and why we have this platform. It is a short interview. It's not that long. It was actually done by a company called Criteo. They kicked off Black History Month last month with interviews with folks who who have a story to tell and who are representing our community in that particular industry. And so I happened to know the person who was doing it, and they thought my story was an interesting one, and they decided they wanted to speak to me. So I talk about my professional journey and how I transitioned into the tech industry, the challenges and rewards of working with diverse cultural environments, why I decided to move to Ghana and what life was like as an expat in Ghana. I talk about my insights in investing in Africa and opportunities available for Pan-Africans, a little bit of my family history and how it, and my connection to the continent. And then I just give some resources and tips for anybody considering expat life in Africa. So whether you're curious about tech in Africa, exploring investment opportunities, or thinking about a life on the continent, this episode is going to have all the valuable insights and inspiration for you. So without further ado, why don't we get right into it?
Joe, I know we got a chance to meet initially, and your background is incredible. I personally think it's a testament to courage, resilience, and growth. Now, while I could see this from the outside, what I would love to do is give an opportunity for our audience here to get an opportunity to get to know you as well. Can you take us through your professional journey and let's talk about, say, the highs, the lows, and some maybe some of the allies and challenges that you may have experienced along the way.
Absolutely. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to Prina, Aaron, and the rest of the team for putting this together. And I'm excited to be here to talk to you all. So my career started in 2006, 2007, answering a Craigslist ad, actually, for what at that time was called an affiliate network. They used to send junk mail as a business, and then they moved into email marketing, and I went to go work there as an affiliate manager. I like to call out that specific first role because the reason why I took the role is I had a professor in my senior year who mentioned that after an interview, you should ask to do a tour of the office. And in that tour, I met a young 19-year-old Puerto Rican kid who, although he was from the Bronx, and we had very similar backgrounds, and he seemed to enjoy what he was doing. He loved the job, and he told me about a kid that they were working with that was doing really well. And so, it was my conversation with him, not the interview that I went on, not the tour, that I always will remember about that job and the reason why I decided to come on board and take that job. Uh, I spent a couple more years working in that space. The financial crisis hit. That is a whole nother conversation for another time, but I was underemployed or unemployed, however you want to describe it, for a little over 2 years. And a theme of my career is I'd gotten the tax return that year, and half of it was spent on paying off some credit card debt. The other half was buying a course. And in that course, I learned about LinkedIn, and it was 2009. LinkedIn had just kicked off, and they said, like, this is Facebook and your resume combined. And so I took this course, followed what the course said, and built a profile, got a couple of folks that I formerly worked with, a couple allies, you could say, to write endorsements or recommendations for me. And that was how I was reached out to by someone who owned a company and was looking for a salesperson and brought me on. And I worked for him as a contractor for 2 years before I got into the programmatic space. So I was in the programmatic space for about, I guess, since 2011 till now. So a little over, I can't even believe it now. It's been 15 years almost, 14 years or so. So I started off working for a company that was acquired by OpenX. I was at OpenX for 2 years. I went to Smato. And I would say the reason why I got the role at Smato was because I had worked really hard to build a team, and that team got on the radar of one of the sales folks, one of the top sales folks at OpenX. He ended up becoming chief revenue officer at Smato. And at one point in time, they were talking with each other, and they said, we need a Joe Hatagua type person here. And so the person he was talking to was like, well, why don't we just reach out to Joe Hatagua, see what he's up to? Came over to Smato, built that team there. And after the untimely exit of my boss, I was asked to step in and manage the entire demand team at Smato. And I did that for a little over 2 years, grew revenue from 7 million to 25 million per quarter. And from there, I went to work at Hulu for 4 years. Did that for 2 years, went to Ghana, changed my life, and quit my job in January 2020, and moved to the continent of Africa for a few years. So I'm back working on the continent of the United States. I'm working with a company called Elemental TV. I'm the VP of Audience Solutions there, and my role is to help publishers surface their audiences and help demand partners find their audiences online. There's a much longer story, and there's many different points and things that happen along the way, but that's the most succinct way I could describe my career journey.
No, I definitely understand that, and I don't want to not pay respect to the story that could be told. But I want to focus in on your experience at Elemental. Can you tell us about a little bit more about your role? I know you wanted to give us the Cliff Notes version, but I actually do think it could be really relevant to our audience today.
Absolutely. So it's a multifaceted role. I mean, Elemental is a fairly small company. We're a little over 100 plus folks. We operate in many different regions, but we're US focused in terms of the inventory we focus on. So we're an ad server first. We started out as an ad server in 2019. There were a few incumbents in the space. You guys might be familiar with companies like Publica, Freewheel,
Yep,
SpringServe. So
big names,
because
yeah.
they had large incumbents in the space, Elemental started working with publishers in different ways. So we began to build out our services as an ad management platform. So we help publishers build their entire programmatic stack. So a company like Fremantle, which is a producer of thousands of titles that you might be familiar with, like American Idol, Masked Singer, Price is Right, Family Feud. They never actually sold their own inventory as a producer of that content. They had outsourced all of that. So we basically helped them build their entire programmatic stack, get them set up with us as an ad server, set up all the SSPs, and then we're also working with them on going out and meeting with agencies, brands, DSPs, and building PMPs on their behalf. So that's one thing that we do. We also have built our own programmatic spine. And so we can also onboard demand partners to help monetize the inventory that, for example, Fremantle has. And we've also built out a number of other products and services. But the main core of our business is as an ad server and as an ad management platform, helping publishers maximize their content with advertising and continue to offer it for free. And so that's
Yeah.
what Elemental does. And then in my role, as I mentioned earlier, I help those publishers surface those audiences for PMPs. And I'm also working with the SSPs, DSPs, and all the people upstream that are spending on media and helping them drive that spend to the publishers that we work with. So that's the best way to describe what my role is at the company.
Yeah, super smart. So it's a combination of facilitating the programmatic and the direct buys through, and also touching on the curation piece, which I know is a big topic for 2025. Um, I want to transition a little bit into something that you touched on in your introduction, which was moving to another continent in that of Africa. Um, what inspired that? Can you talk to us about what was that process like from idea to reality?
That's a great question. So I had a peer mentor who went to the boarding school I went to. I went to a boarding school for underprivileged kids in Hershey, Pennsylvania. I was there for 13 years actually. And and I'm also first generation American, by the way. My parents were both born in Sierra Leone. They met in the United States. I was conceived in the US, so I'm American citizen, but I'm also Sierra Leonean citizen as well. And I do represent Sierra Leone every day on my wrist. So I had been going to Sierra Leone every year from 2017 through 2020. And in 2019, many of you may be familiar with this, but it marked 400 years since the start of the transatlantic slave trade. And in what they call slave castles in Ghana, where enslaved Africans were held for any time between 3 weeks and 3 months before being brought on a boat, they would walk through a door that said the door of no return. And
Yeah,
so the Tourism Authority of Ghana decided in 2019 they were going to do kind of a full circle moment and do the year of return and promote the idea of returning to the continent. And so I happened to be going to Sierra Leone already, but while in Sierra Leone, a group of us came to Ghana together. And so I was there to experience the year of return in 2019. And that was in December of 2019 after having gone to the continent so many times, but specifically to Sierra Leone. And then now I'm going to Ghana and got to see where Ghana is in its life cycle and what's been going on there and all these people that were here at the same time. And I came back to the States and I was also I should also mention I was advising a company based in Ghana at the time. And so I had met with them in person and saw how impressive they were as a people, as a group, and what they were doing. And I just felt like I wasn't doing enough to work with companies on the continent. So I come back to my role at Hulu. I realized that I was able to walk away from that role and begin to start to work on a new career and advising companies on the continent. And my plan was to kind of bring programmatic to the continent of Africa. And so within a month or so, the pandemic hit, and we were kind of sitting at home. And I realized that I could do more from the continent than I can do from living here in New York City. So on a whim, I mean, after a couple of months of thought, but not you can't really fully prepare yourself for a move like that, I decided to move to Ghana. So in November of 2020, I packed up all my stuff, put it in the storage, and jumped on a flight and moved. And so I lived on the continent of Africa for just over 4 years, or just around 4 years. So from the end of 2020 until just May of last year. So it was
Right.
almost. So yeah, that was the impetus for the move, and that's what what led to it. Yeah, and while I was there, I worked for an e-commerce company called Jumia. It's they call themselves the Amazon of Africa. They
Yeah, yeah.
operate in 11 countries. They're publicly traded on New York Stock Exchange, one of the first ever tech unicorns to come out of the continent of Africa. And I was the head of advertising for Ghana there. So that was a really interesting experience for sure.
Yeah, you touched on a lot in what you just shared. And one of the things that I think would be really jarring for the audience here is the fact that you purchased a one-way ticket. Um, what was expat life like? Do you recommend it? Are you a major advocate? What
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there are pros and cons to it, and even something I've personally considered too. But I think that most people usually don't have a healthy understanding of what it means to be an expat. Can you talk us through that experience?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, there's a lot to talk about. I mean, and that's why I started the YouTube channel, and I launched Authentic African to try to help people understand what that might look like. Look, I'm Westernized, but I do happen to have two parents that were born and raised in Sierra Leone. So there was a cultural understanding, at least of Sierra Leone. Ghana is a completely different country, different culturally. So expat life was there are different things. I always say it's the hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my life, but it was the best thing that I've ever done. Number one, I would say I was very impressed with the people that I worked with. I worked with some of the smartest people I've ever worked with, especially the Nigerians that I worked with. Better command of the English language than I have, and it's a second language or even a third language for many of them. Just an understanding of the way the world works, even though you would think they are siloed or isolated living where they live. Trust me, the world is flat. Democratization of information is there. Everyone has the internet. And so, there was a lot that I had to learn just about the different cultural practices and nuances in Ghana alone, let alone with my counterparts in Nigeria, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, South Africa. I mean, I work with people from all over the continent. And so I learned a lot, a lot. I thought I knew a lot, having gone to Sierra Leone about 6 or 7 times in the prior 5 years. It was so much more that I could learn, and I'm still learning. But yeah, I think the biggest shock for me was, one, the time difference. Something as simple as like the Super Bowl, right? We all think about Super Bowl. Many of us will probably be gathered with friends and sitting and watching the Super Bowl live, but there you're 5 hours or more ahead of time. So sports events, political events, I realized that those things I couldn't do live, or if I did, it would just be in the middle of the night. And so there were things like that that I had to, kind of get used to. Making new friends on the continent, that was a different thing. As an adult, many of the friends I'd made through my early life or in college, some in my career. And it was new to make new friends as a 35-plus-year-old person. And so that was probably a big shock. And then there were certain things like Amazon, right? Like Amazon delivery that I was used to doing, and I didn't realize how addicted to Amazon delivery I was, and losing out on access to things like that. It was definitely challenging. But there were other things that I got to benefit from. I had a housekeeper. For $107 a month, I had someone who cleaned my clothes weekly, did my meal prep, made my bed, did all the things that I was used to doing myself. And I was actually overpaying her, believe it or not. And it was an experience that allowed me to focus on the things that I needed to focus on, and she could do what she did best. And we're still in touch to this day. She's an amazing individual. And so yeah, I mean, there were a lot of shifts in the way I was doing things and the world around me. But yeah, it was an amazing experience for sure. Oh, so to answer your question, I
Yeah, yeah.
recommend visiting often before you make a major move like that. You should visit as often as possible. If you could stay for a month at a time, that is the ideal scenario. Get out of vacation mode, because many people go on vacation, right? And you think you're
Yeah.
gonna live like that, and it's your spending will be different, your lifestyle will be different. So I would recommend visiting whatever country you find of interest multiple times before moving full time, and figuring out how you're going to generate income too, because obviously the pay scale was much different. I was a department head for a global company, and it was the lowest I've ever been paid in my entire career. Even that role that I talked about as an affiliate manager coming right out of university, I made $15,000 less in that role than I did working at this role on the continent of Africa. So I would make that recommendation for sure.
I'm glad you highlighted that because I think typically when people go on vacation, they can see themselves living this lifestyle, and it's like, and you forget that it's a vacation lifestyle. But I really want to reiterate again that I think simply the fact that you were able to purchase a one-way ticket, embrace the salary adjustment, embrace not being able to see live Western events, I think that's a testament of being adaptable and again, courage. So I really want to commend you for that. What would you recommend for somebody who may be listening and is saying, huh, maybe I should actually consider a move and maybe I should visit? Or maybe they're thinking, I will go on vacation, but maybe I want to invest. What would you recommend for these types of people who are thinking and getting their wheels turning right now?
Absolutely. So I'm a big advocate for investing. So my goal with everything that I do is to get people to visit, move, and or invest on the continent of Africa, and specifically in real estate. Real estate is an industry that is a little difficult to understand for many people. It's hard to kind of dip your toe into something where it requires that kind of an investment, but it's well worth it if you know what you're doing and you have the right resources on ground. So I would say, I think a lot of people move or visit the continent of Africa, and because some things operate a little bit differently than what you're used to here, they throw all caution to the wind and just kind of just give all their money to one person and just hope for the best. I would absolutely not do that. I think it's really important to have advocates on the ground, have someone who understands the legal system, someone who understands where to find land, and the process, the entire process. You want to follow the process to the T. Don't try to cut corners. Don't think that you can skip processes. You have to follow every process. Every country is different. Every municipality is different, and you need to know exactly what is required in order to have full ownership of that land, if that is something you want to do. But I definitely recommend buying land on the continent. I own 5 acres of land in one location. I have 4 town lots in another location, and I have 2 town lots somewhere else. And I'm in the process of looking at land in Ghana as well. So that's all in Sierra Leone. I'm looking at land in Ghana as well. But yeah, I'm a big advocate for definitely investing, but do your due diligence and make sure you have an advocate on the ground, someone who spent time learning the systems on the ground and who understand what to do. So my first piece of land, I was lucky enough to buy through family. So I at least got the process down before I made another purchase. So for me, it was a simple process once I knew all the steps that were required, and I knew where to go to get all those things done. So it is a really important element to not throw caution to the wind. Be as cautious as you would be anywhere else, but just know that if you buy land and you do all the things you need to do to secure that land, 10 to 15 years, the land will be worth exponentially more than it was that you when you bought it, as long as you follow, some simple principles that I talk about on the platform, and I make sure that people are aware of when they're thinking about buying land.
Makes sense. And I don't know about others, but you actually had me sold at monthly housekeeping. But but I want to make the conversation a little bit lighter for just for a moment. During your time abroad, what would you say was something new or fun that you had discovered about Africa?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, was how impressed I was by the people that I worked with. I mean, as a person who am culturally American, have two parents that were born and raised on the continent, I still had that idea of American exceptionalism. And we talk a lot about where America is in terms of math and science, but we still think that we know more. And when I got there, I was very impressed by the people that I met and people from all walks of life. Education is super important, especially in West Africa. I mean, it's 54 countries on the continent, 55, depending on who you are and who you ask. But so I met some people that were really, really impressive and people who I think we kind of have it easy as difficult as it might be. I've lived in the projects before, so I've been on food stamps, all that kind of stuff. But I still have seen what it's like for people who don't have those kinds of programs, right? Who don't have government housing, who don't have food stamp programs. Then they have to figure out how they're going to find a meal every day. And some of those people are some of the most impressive people that I've ever met because I think that the people that the ingenuity that people have to have and the resourcefulness you have to have. I mean, I met a kid that started a virtual reality company, and it's because he had access to one computer from when he was in kindergarten until he was a senior in high school. And then the university he went to had like four computers. And he was able to teach himself how to code and he started a virtual reality company. And I think that to me, those kinds of stories are really, really impressive. And I think that was probably the biggest shock for me is what people have been able to do with so little. And it led me to understand the term that I now utilize called blue passport privilege, right? Us having this blue passport allows us to go to even parts of Africa that other people who are African cannot go to as easily. So, for example, I went to Egypt for a trip, and I was able to do visa on arrival with my American passport. My Nigerian counterpart was denied a visa at the Egyptian embassy in Nigeria to go to a company function in Egypt, right? And so I think that was something that was huge for me was the that blue passport privilege is something that I took for granted and I'm very grateful for. And as much as I can complain about things that go on in the United States, I am so grateful for what luckily my parents, met in the United States and I was conceived here. So I was born with that blue passport privilege.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that because I do think that, hearing more about you, a lot of your experiences, I think it becomes a bit clearer to see that there is a common denominator in that when you truly understand what it's like to not have, that you begin to understand what it means to be adaptable and resourceful.
Absolutely.
Um, and I think it's even shining through in the way in which you speak about your experiences. Um, if you could go back in time, reflecting on your career and your life so far, and have lunch with an African or a Black American who's influenced you, who may have even played a role in some of the important decisions you've made in your life, who would it be?
Yeah, so this question I've gone back and forth on because, I'm my grandfather and my great grandfather were both chiefs. So I'm a descendant of chiefs. And so that used to be my answer. But now it would be Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah is the first president of Ghana. And he brought Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Maya Angelou to Ghana when Ghana, and he also renamed it from Gold Coast to Ghana because there was a Ghana Empire in West Africa hundreds of years ago. And in order to kind of keep the name going, he renamed the Gold Coast to Ghana when he became president. And he was sought after. He was a university professor at many different universities in Pennsylvania and UK. And he came, and this is in the 60s, by the way, 50s and 60s. And then he came back to the continent and became the first president of Ghana. And he taught a lot about the unification of Africa and Africa being a United States of Africa. And unfortunately, the CIA, the American CIA, actually funded a opposition to him, and he was removed from office. But he's rare in the sense that he actually ended up becoming the co-president of Guinea when Guinea gained its independence, and that was a French colony. And so he was formerly a part of a British colony, helped them gain their independence, and shepherded the way that we see Ghana today. Even the flag colors are the Pan-African flag colors. And he also gifted a house to W.E.B. Du Bois and met Nina Simone. And, Nina Simone spent the remaining years of her life there. So did W.E.B. Du Bois. And so, and then he became the co-president of Guinea later. So very impressive individual. I would love to sit down with Kwame Nkrumah for a meal and just try to pick his brain and see, how he kind of got to his life philosophy. And and I'd love to see what he would have been able to do had he not been unceremoniously removed from office while he was traveling somewhere to tell the United States to get out of Vietnam. That's a conversation for another time, but yeah.
No, I hear you well. But I realize we're coming up on time. If I may ask one more question for you, where can we learn more about your experiences abroad? And so I know you mentioned earlier during our talk that you had a channel
Yes.
where we could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So the platform is called Authentic African. I am across all TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, but YouTube and Instagram are probably the platforms that I would say I spend the most time on. And so I would definitely recommend it's Authentic African. It's the Pan-African flag with the fist in the middle. It's hard to find. It's hard to not to find. I mean, it's easy to find once you see it. And yeah, you can hear everything about my experience moving. I do live streams weekly where I talk about things that are going on even now while I'm building a house there and purchased land. So my experience and then others' experiences, other folks who've moved to the continent of Africa from the West, and then other people who've moved back. I'm actually going to be interviewing somebody next Monday who moved back to Miami after living there for a little over 4 years. She was actually one of my realtors while I was there. And so we'll get a chance to hear her story and why she left. And so we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you'll learn something, I think, along the way. So
Awesome, Authentic African. Thank you for that. Well, I realize we're at time. Joe, first and foremost, thank you for your time. I think it's a privilege to be able to hear your story and hear your experiences and even have the opportunity to leverage them for our own personal growth. Um, I appreciate you, and Karina, I'd like to pass it back to you to close.
thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much, Joe. I want to have lunch with you, Joe, and a few lunches and dinners and all the things. You're so knowledgeable. I am so impressed. And I truly believe the universe does not make mistakes. I know we worked together over a decade ago when we were still in high school. But I think we were meant to see each other that day at that event. And I'm so excited. Again, if anyone has questions, feel free to follow up. Make sure you're following Joe. Go to LinkedIn. I appreciate everyone's time today. I hope we all learned something, and we'll talk soon. Thank you both so much.
All right, so that was the interview. Let me know what you guys think. I see a few of you guys joined late. That was an interview I did with a company called Criteo. Prina and I worked together at a company, as she mentioned, 10 years ago when we were over 10 years ago when we were in high school. Obviously that's a joke. But yeah, so, we ran into each other at an event, and she told me that she was doing this series. And I had been, telling her about my life in Ghana and me moving back and what that was all about. And so she asked if she could interview me for, I think it was close to 200 people or so at her organization where she works, the company Criteo. It's a publicly traded company. And so I said, of course, absolutely. And so gave me a chance to share my story a little bit more of my story that I don't always talk about here because I don't really ever talk about my full-time job, what I do outside of the Authentic African umbrella. So I think it was good to be able to do that a little bit and and for you guys to get a chance to hear it. So I do want to just a couple things that I want to talk about before we go. First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody who watched all the way through, who's been supporting the channel. If you guys aren't aware, the Instagram page just hit 500,000. We just hit 500,000 on Instagram. So I want to first say thank you to everybody again for helping us reach that milestone marker. I mean, I don't know when I thought I was going to get to 500,000. I did not think it was going to be March 1st. So yeah, so we're a little over 500,000 right now. So thank you to all of you guys for helping us get there. We're slowly creeping towards 30K on YouTube. And so I just want to thank you guys all for supporting the channel, sharing the channel with folks, and making sure that they're getting this information and this knowledge. You know, we always say, it takes a village, and it really is difficult to build a social media following around something that's not salacious or isn't all just about entertainment, right? I mean, I try to do some entertainment, but mostly it's education. And the goal is for us to work together to build a more prosperous Africa. And, you know, and it's difficult to do when you're not, you know, I'm not trying to go viral, you know, like I really am trying to do my best to share what I can and make sure that people are gaining something from it. So I do want to thank you guys all for, you know, the support. Shout out to Sawana, she's back. Been a minute. We got Manelik here. He said, hit that like button, share, and support the channel. Absolutely. Please do that. There was someone else here that mentioned, okay, Afro Carib. Hey, Joe, watching from Canada, been following since 2021. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, the YouTube channel started in February of 2021. And so, and the Instagram page started in February of 2019. And so this thing is, we've been working on this for a while now. I mean, it's, you know, it's been a long, arduous process. It's not easy. You know, anybody who's ever tried to start a YouTube channel, you know, it's not easy. But you know, it's worth it though. It's worth it. And, you know, anytime I run into any of you and you tell me, you know, something that's helped you make a decision, you know, whether that's to move, that's to invest, it's to visit the continent of Africa, I'm happy that I've been some small part of that process. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, unless there's other questions, Eleanor says she's watching from London. Okay, so by the way, at the beginning of that interview, I do want to say, I mentioned a lot of acronyms. I put them in the chat. I know that might be hard for many people who don't know anything about what I do in my day job. It may seem confusing. I forgot that I got into all those acronyms. The people who I was being interviewed in front of were all fully aware of that. But basically what I was expressing is we help keep most of what you watch on television free, right? Outside of Hulu, Netflix, Amazon, you know, most of whatever else you want to watch on any other apps is free, and it remains free because they run ads, and I help facilitate that with the company that I work for and my role in particular. So that's what I was talking about at the beginning part of that interview. And then I also talked about the financial crisis. That's something I'll probably do for another time. But it's definitely worth talking about. I mean, the experiences that I had and the person I became through that, you know, I've lived below the poverty line in the United States on more than one occasion, more than I would like to have lived that way. You know, having lived in the projects for 8 or 9 months, having been on food stamps, you know, been on unemployment a couple of times. I'm grateful that the United States has those programs, and we should not be eliminating those programs. Just throwing that out there for those who think we should. If not for that, I may have found another career path that might have got me locked up, to be honest. So I'm happy that I was able to survive on those programs in order to, you know, be able to be here today, to be able to share this story. It's a very different story than what it could have been had not been for those social safety nets, or what some people call entitlement programs. Anyway, Eleanor is watching from London. Pro Woman says, brand building for real. Well, and congrats and well deserved. Came late, got to catch the replay. Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was an interview with a company that we do some work, so we do some business with, and a former colleague of mine. Actually, there's a company that I mentioned in my career journey that, you know, obviously her and I met at. Afro Carib says, congrats on your Instagram growth. Thank you. Catherine Smith is in the house. Been a minute. She said, hey Joe, congratulations. Love your content. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been a wild ride. So I want to thank everybody for, you know, sticking with me the whole time. I mean, I remember going live with like 4 people on the live stream, videos getting like 60 views, 50 views. And so, you know, even with the Instagram page, you know, that grew kind of quickly actually, but we got stuck at one point for about a year, and we couldn't grow beyond that. And so, you know, it took a little while to kind of find my voice, figure out what made the most sense, what kind of content to share. But it feels like we're hitting our stride, and, you know, we're understanding the audience and what you guys want to hear from us. But always tell me what you guys want to hear more about, whether it's stories on the continent, more about my particular life, what's going on with me. I've been, you know, if you guys might remember, those of you who've been around for a while might remember that my laptop crashed in October of 2023. And I was not able to get it repaired or even recover most of the content for over a year. And that was because of the costs associated with it and a bunch of other things that just did not allow me to do that. So because of that, I'm putting out a bunch of content now that I had been able to recover from that laptop. And so we're going to do updates with all of those folks. Some of the content was lost permanently. We could do what we can do, but we can't get everything. And so that's what you're seeing now. And so if you come back to the page on YouTube, please support by watching those videos. I've gone over 3 months, maybe even 4 months without posting any vlogs. And now we're back on. So you're going to get a bunch of Ghana real estate videos and a bunch of interviews that I've done in Ghana. And then once that is done, we are moving into my content from Sierra Leone. And you'll get a chance to hear from all sorts of different people who are in Sierra Leone, those who have moved, those who've never left, in the same way you've heard from people in Ghana, those who've moved to Ghana and those who've never left Ghana. You know, we like to interview folks who have businesses that are homegrown and they grew up in that country. And then we also like to interview people who've decided to leave the West and move to West Africa. And so just like I was telling my story, I'm now telling their stories. And I've been doing it throughout time, but I'm doing it a lot more now as I travel back and forth between, you know, the US and West Africa. So with that, guys, I want to say thank you all for watching and for staying attentive. This has always been, this has been a pleasure. I'm glad to see some familiar faces back in the live stream comments. And those of you who are new, we haven't really gotten a chance to catch up. Shout out to you, Dennis. Hit up Alex. He has my number. My number has changed since the last time you and I have spoken. So yeah, hit up. Alex has my number, so you can hit him up. He'll be able to give you my updated number, or I can just get your number from him and I'll hit you up. Yeah. So with that, I want to say thank you all for watching. I see that there's a bunch of people from YouTube. There's a couple people from Facebook. Yeah. So from wherever you're watching from, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys all on the next live stream. And so within a month or so, the pandemic hit and we were kind of sitting at home, and I realized that I could do more from the continent than I can do from living here in New York City. So on a whim, I mean, after a couple of months of thought, but not, you can't really fully prepare yourself for a move like that, I decided to move to Ghana. So in November of 2020, I packed up all my stuff, put it in the storage, and jumped on a flight and moved.